is 9725. We're looking at a 2012 Camry, and we just explained to the kids briefly how a brake works. Ultimately, this thing here, it spins around in a circle when you move. So this is called a brake rotor, and it spins. So if you go forward, it spins forward. You go backward, it spins backwards. Now, when you want this thing to, when you want your car to stop, you have to squeeze onto this rotor. You have to, if you squeeze on this rotor, it will stop spinning. So to do that, you have brake pads. So these pads, one goes to the other side and one goes to this side. And as it squeezes, it's like holding this thing from spinning around. And when you release your brake, it doesn't squeeze anymore, and this thing continues spinning. Now the question is, two questions. If you keep on using your brakes, what's gonna wear out? The metal material or the brake pad material? The answer is the brake pad material, because it's soft. And there's different versions of it. And this brake is called a brake rotor, and there's also different versions of it. But ultimately, you want it a certain thickness. If it gets too thin, it can't dissipate heat. And so they write in like how many millimeters it should be the thinnest. So this one's 8.5 millimeter. Anything thinner than 8.5 millimeter, you can't use it. And so that's that. Now, this is called a brake caliper, and its job, the next question is, how does these brake pads squeeze together? It uses hydraulics, which is basically a fancy word for some fluid doing some work. So this fluid travels from your foot that you press in. It travels in this brake line. It travels, this is coming from your foot. It goes here, and when you press your foot, fluid is going this way, and then goes this way, and then goes this way, and then it goes this way. And then it pushes on a piston, pushing it that way. And that piston is connected to a pad, like this. So the piston pushes on one side, and the pad goes towards this side, squeezing the rotor. Well, on the other side of the piston, on the other side of this, so there's the piston, and there's this caliper. This caliper has this other side, and this one's stationary, it's dead. So if you squeeze one side, and this side's stationary, then whatever's in the middle gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and therefore that's how the brake works in a nutshell. And some information is you tend to usually change some tidbits. You usually change the brake pads and the rotors together. That's like the ideal situation, because this surface has mated well with this surface, and if you do that, it reduces chances of squeaking. And if you don't, and if you use sandpaper, sometimes the mate can be close and it's good enough. And if this rotor was to be bad, as in terms of like it's not true straight, it's warped, and when you hit the brakes, you'll see your steering wheel shake back and forth, and then you're like, okay, you either they change the rotor or get it machined. But nowadays, in the day of like machines and mass production, it's even almost cheaper just to buy new rotors. So that's that. Another thing is, when you take out your brake pads, you want to see a nice even wear. Like if this is a certain height, this should be a certain height. And the difference between inside and outside should be also very similar. If, for example, if outside is used a lot and inside isn't, then you know that the mechanism that allow these brake pads to move in and out, they're called brake caliper pins, which they live here and they live here. There's grease in them, and they allow these brake pads to flow. And if these aren't worn correctly, you go backwards and you're like, oh, the grease is bad, or somebody did something wrong and it cannot flow. So that's working backwards. And then the last tidbit, maybe two more tidbits, is if you hit the brakes and you let go and it keeps on grabbing, it could be that these brake lines are internally broken inside, where they swell up and they close up into like a small hole. So basically brake fluid can go in that small hole, but by the time you release the fluid, the brake pedal, the fluid cannot travel back. And when it travel back, it's just like dammed up over this side. So imagine like a small orifice, and the fluid goes in, but it can't go out. So it's constantly holding on to these brake pads. So in that case, your car can pull to one side or the other. Because when you release the brakes, one side's spinning and the other side's still gripping, sort of like a tank effect. And then what else is a good tidbit? It's a good idea that like every like 7 or 10 years, you can flush out these brake fluids and get new ones in there. And that's easy if you have another person or you buy a tool to, it's called power bleed. But ultimately, it just requires somebody punching the brakes up there, hold on to it, and then a person opens up a nut on this side. And on this side, it is, for this car, it's this nipple right here. You open a nut and you get it into a container with the clear straw into it, and that straw always has to hit water because the fluid can come in, but when it draws back out, it draws fluid and it never draws air. And so you see air bubbles come out. So that's in a nutshell. If you have another person, it's pretty easy. Some cars, you put a bi-directional scanner and you can just tell it to bleed all the time. Once you open it, it just squirts out. So there's many different methods. But regardless, you can get the air out of the system. Because if you're compressing air, then the brake system isn't really working because you want to compress a liquid. All right, risk her out. Today is 9/7/25.